You're listening to the Mental Money Podcast, the show that shows you how to master your mind to maximize your money. This show is for people who love to watch their bank accounts grow while shifting their relationship to money. Without further ado, let's get these insider insights from today's leading expert.
Yep.
Hi, this is Natalie. You're listening to the Mental Money Podcast, and I am so excited for you guys to be here today. As we all know, well, maybe you don't know, if this is your first time listening, we are going to explore the intersection between mindset and money. And then for those of you who are listening in, welcome back, right? Today we have with us James Woodall, and he's going to be helping us really dissect our mindset and our money and wealth in terms of wealth management, okay? James, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here today and see what we can share.
Yeah, of course. So we like to typically, depending on the topic, kind of dissect the episodes into two parts. So it's either mindset or money, but you get to choose which one we attack first.
Ooh, I like that. Let's do mindset. I'm always big on mindset.
Everybody picks mindset.
Yeah, that's the way to go. That's the way to go.
And the thing is, like, I always like to point that out because I'm just like, you guys don't think mindset is important, but all the experts are picking it. So there must be a theme here, right? Okay. So mindset. Let's talk about what were some of the earliest messages you've heard about money? And the reason why I ask you specifically, I typically don't, but I want to hear you is because you don't represent the majority demographic of the people who listen to this podcast. So as a male, right, because we mostly appeal to women, and then as a white male, we mostly appeal to African American women. I want to see maybe like some of the differences between what we heard, or if there's similarities.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I think about my earliest memory of money, it really came from my mom.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom worked as a private banker down in Houston. They kind of worked in the medical district, and they had some larger clients.
Right.
And I remember she's always like, "Hey, you need to learn how to balance a checkbook," because in school it wasn't really ever taught.
Right.
And especially now, it almost seems like it's specifically not designed to be taught. And that's something that's, we always talk about later. But I remember my mom talking to me about, "Hey, you need to learn how to balance a checkbook," and literally sitting me down with an old billfold checkbook and saying, "Okay, you have $10 to spend on a toy."
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Oh, all right, $10.
Mm-hmm.
Toys R Us." And I would go
You're
there.
that old.
I have that. I love Toys R Us. I miss it, by the way. Jeffrey,
Yeah.
and his name is spelled wrong. Was always like, that was my spot. I love Toys R Us. And I think I actually could tell he was like an X-Men action figure or like a truck. But I remember my mom's like, "Hey, you have $10 to spend." And she gave me a checkbook or basically a checkbook balancing. Says, "Okay, you have $10. Well, what'd you spend on it?" I was like, "I don't know, $8. She goes, "Okay." Wrote down, "You bought this for $8. What do you have left?" I go, $2. And I'll never forget. And I said, "This sucks. This is boring. I don't like doing this." But it was the best lesson she taught me, because it said that, hey, money goes in, money goes out. You need to account for that. And it keeps you from getting in trouble. And candidly, when I was in college, I had friends that I thought were doing well and working hard, but no, they were just swiping credit cards, and they were in serious credit card debt from it.
Yeah. So in other words, mom put you in a really good position to like kind of fundamentally learn about money. How old were you when this happened?
I was young. I was 5, 6.
Yeah.
And it's what I kind of tell my clients too that have young kids, around that age is a good time while they're doing math, is to say, here's how money works. And I actually was at my girlfriend's house, and she has 2 young nephews that were diving for literally pennies and quarters. So I thought it was kind of interesting, just a little side note.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I wrote a couple of kids' books that are for the moms, and it's meant to, well, it's for the kids technically, but it's to help the moms support their kids in like really understanding financial literacy. And the books are really structured so that the kids can be introduced to these vocabulary words as early as the age of 3. And it's interesting because when I do podcast interviews, people look at me like 3, and I'm like, if they can speak, they can understand what an asset is. And there's definitions that can kind of help them, simplify it in a way where they might not conceptualize it, but then you can find ways, like different ways, like credit card or something where they can actually try to find real world applications for it. But that's your job as a parent. I'm not trying to solve all the issues, but it works. Look, you're a wealth management expert now. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you understand these things fundamentally. And then you can kind of, and then growing up, you're what, 18, 19, 20 tops when you're starting college. And you could see the distinctions between what you had experienced and what some people in your peers were experiencing. So it does that those lessons clearly did follow you.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I can tell you when I was maybe, let's say, fifth grade, I want to say like junior achievement was around, was real popular then. And they actually had us do a stock trading game. And there's tons of these stock trading games online that are free. And I remember they said, okay, you have like, I don't know, $100. You need to win in the next 6 months or the year. I think it's actually a year-long program.
Right.
And me, because I'm always competitive, I was like, I gotta win. And so I was like, what stocks do I want to pick? And I remember thinking like Harley Davidson, because my neighbor had a Harley Davidson. But then other people were saying like, oh, you need to pick like this, and this, and going like, oh, that doesn't make sense. But it was interesting learning about the stock market and seeing, actually feeling, especially now, like what it felt to lose money or to make money. That was also a really cool thing that stuck with me for years.
Yeah.
I couldn't recommend it enough. And it was fun. I had a fun time doing it.
Right, because it's a game, and then you're actually getting some real life application. So I'm glad you said that, because it kind of makes it like more real how you really do have to sit down and have these conversations with your kids, for sure. Right. Okay. So those are some of the early messages around money. How else has that kind of translated into your life growing up and kind of coming into like what we call adulthood?
Yeah, so my parents were pretty adamant. They said, "Hey, you're 15 years old, go get a job." So here in Texas, I was the youngest you could work, and I would lifeguard for summers. And best and worst job ever. 95% boredom, 5% terror.
Yeah.
But that was the best job because I learned what taxes are, and I was like, "All right, I'm gonna get this big paycheck," and I went, "Where'd my money go?" And that was a great learning experience.
Yeah.
And then also my mom being the banker, she goes, "Hey, you need to save your money." She goes, "Ultimately, it's your decision, but you need to save it." And so I drove this stupid loud truck when I turned 16 that set off car alarms. It was obnoxious. Things really haven't changed. Um, and I would drive this truck around, and I got like maybe 10 miles to the gallon in gas. And so all my money was going to gas. And I kind of learned quickly that, hey, I can't really save because I'm spending all my money going to Sonic or on gas. And so that kind of helped me learn. And my mom was always saying, like, hey, even my dad at this point was like, hey, you gotta save, you gotta save, you gotta save. And I thought save in a bank account.
Yeah.
Well, because at the time there's really not really investment accounts for folks like myself to really invest in. That certainly changed. Now, if you're a kid, they have what's called a kid's Roth IRA, which is the best thing in the world. If your kids are working, like I'm almost adamant with all my clients, they need to have something, because if you get 50 years ish of tax-free growth by the time you retire, I did some math a long time ago, and it was like an 8% return, which is roughly the S&P 500. And you're doing it for 50 years, it's like $2 or $3 million.
Yeah.
Because you had so much time. And that's all tax-free money when you retire. That's substantial. So that's probably when I was, working age, is probably the earliest thing I can remember was that.
Okay. I know you're enjoying the episode, but I wanted to quickly let you know about the book Converted, Uncover the Hidden Strategies You Need to Achieve Massive Credit Score Success. As you are on your financial journey, this book is designed to be the guide towards ensuring that your journey is as smooth as possible. Doesn't matter if you're clearing up your mindset or on the verge of having more money, credit is going to follow you forever. I bet you that you'll see, as you begin and continue to apply the resources mentioned in any given episode, credit will continue to come up, and we want you to get right. Go ahead and head to www.convertedcredit.com. That's www.convertedcredit.com. That's www.convertedcredit.com, and get your copy today. So I kind of really want to shift over into money a little bit, because it kind of really starts to ask the questions about, like, we as personal consumers, like we have businesses, you and I, so we kind of can cushion our tax impact a little bit in a couple of ways. But for the consumer on the personal level who might not have a business, or who doesn't have even like an IRA or a 401k or anything like that, what other tax benefits can they see, or what other vehicles can they put their money in that will kind of help cushion some of that?
Yeah, so you're definitely speaking my language. I love tax planning. So when we think of tax savings, how do I lower my taxes as a employee? There's the concept of really itemizing doesn't really matter as much because the standard deduction
Mm-hmm.
increased so much. It really doesn't make much of a difference, and you
Right.
kind of net out the same, maybe a little bit better,
Right.
depending on where you are. Um, a good way to do it is to be smart with where your money goes. There's always insurance options.
Mm-hmm.
There's like whole life plans, universal life, etc., where you can invest money in there and annuities as well. You
Mm-hmm.
put the money in there and it can grow tax free if it's considered variable. So
Right.
it has investments options in there and so they stay and grow. Another way, if you're in a very high tax state where the state's tax very high, or looking at New York City, which also has its own separate tax as well, you can invest in muni bonds. So that's a grand scale thing. Maybe right now may not always be the best time to invest in those as
Mm-hmm.
interest rates go up, bond prices go down, but those also give you tax-free income. You can get triple tax exempt. That's pretty good.
Right.
Um, Another way to keep lowering your taxes is to, leverage, if you have kids, leverage a child tax credit.
Mm.
That's great too. So candidly, when I was W-2 employed, I used TurboTax all the time. It seemed
Right.
to work out.
Right.
Those are kind of the big key considerations. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, if you're in a place that's getting taxed very high, I live here in Texas and Dallas, and we
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of folks come over from California. They said I can't handle the taxes anymore, and
Yeah.
you can get them when we have that luxury here in the U.S. So if you're in that situation and you want to move, it's not the worst time to do it.
Yeah. So moving is
Yeah.
one of the better things to do, depending on where you're. If you're in a state that's heavily taxed, it might be worth it.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'm somewhat of a Joe Rogan fan, and he was one of the people that kind of was part of that mass exodus out of California to Texas, because Texas apparently has like, does it have state tax or no state, or lower state tax?
We have no state tax. So the
Okay.
way Texas gets you, because it's now I'm a big Rogan fan too. I literally did the on it workout this morning.
Good.
So yeah, I love that guy. He says some cool stuff. So Texas, the way they kind of get you is the property taxes are pretty high.
Mm, oh,
They're and every city is a little different. Some are higher, some are lower, but
mhm.
that's kind of where they get you, especially
Yeah.
because home values go up.
Right.
Now there's ways around that too, right? If you move a little bit further out in Texas, there's space everywhere. We got a lot of space. If you buy property that's over 5 acres to 25 acres, you can get a agriculture exemption. That
Mm,
drops that. If you're a veteran, you get an exemption. If you're over 65, you get exemptions. The tax law is designed for three things. It's to really help build the economy,
right.
and build the economy through having kids,
Hmm.
starting a business,
Hmm.
and buying a home. That's the tax law.
Right.
That's kind of how we want to do it.
Right. No, that makes sense. So, um, are those three things to consider if you're going to be moving, as far as like the taxes that you would be able to grab?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. So when I plan for my clients, when I plan for retirement, I have a handful that want to stay here. Others are in, like, let's say Alaska, and
Hmm.
they want to stay in Alaska. Well, we got a plan for those taxes in retirement.
Okay.
What we're seeing, which is kind of cool, is across the country, states that have those higher taxes
Hmm.
from a state level, excuse me, are actually lowering their taxes because they've realized that, hey, we have these surpluses from all the COVID relief funds. Let's lower those taxes and create a more competitive advantage
Yeah.
between each of the states, because we want people moving here because we want our economies to grow.
Which state is this? I'm in the market too. No, I'm just kidding.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's actually a lot. I wish I had the list of them off the top of my head, but I think it's like South Carolina, one of the Carolinas.
Hmm.
I think maybe Arizona. Of course, I'm on the spot now. I can't think of
Hmm.
them, but there's a
Right.
handful of states that are lowering them and have a plan
Mm,
to lower them in the next
right.
5 to 10 years.
Right. Interestingly enough, like I personally, like even as a personal finance professional, I never really think about, or I when I speak to my clients, I never really think about how moving or where you live really does, other than like outside of like quality of living, like the cost of things
Yeah.
versus like your income and what the median income is in that place. But I guess that's a really good point and something to highly consider.
It's really something to consider. And the reason why we're seeing this a lot too is because with the tax cuts that happened in, what was it, 2018, 2017, they made so, hey, you can't write off state income taxes against the federal side. The federal government actually had the largest tax returns they've ever had in history. And they still want to keep raising taxes. So,
Right.
if you can just control what you can control, I know moving is a big thing, but
Right.
a lot of folks are doing it. I almost moved from Dallas to Boston. And even with the pay raise, I saw that I was taking actually a pretty substantial pay cut from just cost of living and taxes. And I was like, well, this is the best deal. So
Yeah.
I just try to go visit and get real good lobster up there and actual Italian food, not like we
Yeah.
have down here.
On the north end. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, yeah. So one of my businesses are incorporated in Massachusetts. I used to live there. And the taxes last year whooped us. Right. And we're a small business. So I'm sure I could understand like why that move is, well, like you had that hesitation for that move for sure.
I
Yeah.
did. I turned it down. I loved it. I thought it was a cool city. I've always enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's just I couldn't live. So I think that's a really big thing. Is if you think about what you want out of life, where do you take, like, how do you take advantage of it, right? Like,
Right.
what do you want out of life, and then what's available. I think the pandemic was probably amazing in that, because you always got to find a good side of something, right? That it showed some management company or some managers at companies that, okay, actually my employees can work remote. So we have all these Zoom towns blowing up all over the country. Like, you take advantage of it. Move somewhere different, somewhere that's nice, and maybe not always 105 like it is today.
Yeah.
But take advantage of it. Yeah, go live somewhere cool. Like me personally, I want to live in Idaho. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I want to retire. Yeah.
Is there like a financial reason why you want to retire there, or is it just kind of like you think you'd thrive there?
I think I would thrive. Honestly, from a financial side of it, you can say it's actually a worse move because they have state taxes, but I just think it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
There's just beautiful places. I've always loved that, part of the country or the Pacific Northwest. That's just a great place to sit on a porch. And then of course it's me, so I'll probably have one or two more bourbons than I should.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I look at it. Just what do you want out of life, and then use that money as a tool. Tax is a way to kind of just tweak it a little bit more, get a little bit more out of it, and then, but really at the end of the day, it's life. What do you want? Yeah. So what do you want out of life? You don't have to be trapped if you don't want to be.
Right. No, that makes sense. Yeah. So interestingly enough, speaking of being trapped and speaking of Massachusetts, one of the things that I noticed a lot about people who live in that part of the country is that one of the reasons they get trapped there is they probably can't live in Boston proper, like that actual Boston area, unless they live in like Dorchester, one of like the lower socioeconomic communities, or they get pushed out to cities like Worcester, which is like maybe an hour and a half out the city.
Been to Worcester yet?
Yeah.
That's the hot dog place, right?
Worcester?
Is it the place? That's in the one in Rhode Island with like the really sketchy hot dogs that are really good.
No, no. Worcester's still in Massachusetts. It's just kind of like west. Yeah, it's west of Boston. And then also you notice that people kind of get stuck there, because I actually know someone who's kind of in that situation where she doesn't have the finances to move out of Massachusetts, really because of how like kind of socialized the healthcare is there. It would make less sense for her with all of like her health conditions, and like the health implications would be really bad if she moved to Texas. She was actually thinking about moving to like the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and it just didn't make sense financially. So there are some, like you said, there are some, like just now kind of going through it in my mind, and you mentioning Massachusetts, yeah, there definitely are some implications to where you live for sure. So what other like vehicles can people really look into, not necessarily for taxes, but like wealth building that we should look into? I know you mentioned life insurance. I honestly and truly don't want to go into life insurance. I've spoken to so many.
I get it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's why I started my firm, was because I don't want to be the life insurance guy.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. So many universal life insurance people.
Yep. Yeah. I totally get it. And they all have, the same type. I understand.
Yeah. So what other vehicles can we use? Like, I really talk to me like your mom talks to you, the banker, like she knows what's going on inside of there, right? Like what
Sometimes.
other that's funny. What other like vehicles and stuff can we use to really
So
build our wealth?
there's a lot of ways to do it, and let's call it what it is. Building wealth takes time.
Mm-hmm.
It takes time or it takes assets. The joke is, when I get older, I wish I knew when I was younger, I had the energy at the time when I was younger. When you're younger, like, oh man, I wish I had all that money, right?
Right.
There's a lot of vehicles and tools you can use.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge fan of Roth IRAs,
Okay.
and if your company offers it, Roth 401ks. I'm a huge fan because you have the opportunity to, put money in there today.
Mm-hmm.
So Roth is $6,000 or $7,000 if you have catch up. A Roth 401k, if your company offers it, is $20,500, and then the company will typically match pre-tax money for their tax purposes. But I love those two. I'm kind of a big fan of having both of those as just a starting point for a lot
Mm-hmm.
of folks,
Mm-hmm.
because you get tax-free growth for the rest of your life. Then you don't have to take RMDs out at 72 years old. So
RMD.
the required minimum distribution. So
Okay.
if you have like your normal IRA or 401k at 72, or annuity or life insurance, the IRS says, okay, it's time for us to get our cut. We
Okay.
want that money. So you start taking that money out, and it's based off of a schedule. So it's based off of the prior year's value,
Mm-hmm.
and then whatever your rate is, and it's just a number that will come out.
Okay.
So for example, this year, if you have an RMD, that required minimum distribution, you had a very high, December 2021, value, and you got to take out a lot of money at a lower price. So that
Mm-hmm.
actually hurts you from two different ways, because one, you get taxes.
Right.
Two, you're selling at a loss,
Right.
maybe at a lower, so that opportunity cost is very high. Where
Mm-hmm.
the Roth IRA or Roth 401k, you don't have to do that. There is no RMD. So
Mm-hmm.
you can keep that going forever. And then, in fact, what I do for some of my folks is, if they don't need that Roth money, keep it invested, keep it actually aggressive. And so when you pass away, your beneficiaries go and get that account tax free. And
Mm-hmm.
then on top of it, the new rule says that any inherited IRAs or 401ks have to be basically emptied out in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So if you pass away and then your children get that Roth IRA, or the Roth, they get 10 years of tax-free growth as well.
Right.
Imagine what kind of wealth you can build from there. So if you're
Right.
thinking as, let's say I'm 16 years old, I know this is an extreme example, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
16 years old, I'm gonna have this Roth IRA for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time. And we typically plan for folks, if you're younger, say in the 90s,
Right.
it's a long time. That's 70
Yeah.
years of growth, right?
Right. Exactly.
And then another 10 years on top of that. That's how you build wealth. We look at, folks. So around DFW, especially where I used to live in the Fort Worth side, Ross Perot owned a lot of the land out there.
Mm-hmm.
He knew that because the US thinks their manifest destiny, things tend to grow west. All cities tend to grow west.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I'm gonna start buying up all this land for cheap. Well, his son is now selling it for millions and
Mm.
millions. And that's how they're building wealth, is they're planning for that next generation.
Yeah.
So it can take time. Sometimes you can get lucky, but it does take time, and it has to be a process. Candidly, I call mine a family office, right?
Right.
You
Yeah.
got to run it like a business.
Right.
And that's a good way to build wealth. Also to keep investing, because wealth grows. I know I'm kind of ranting, but
No, you're good.
wealth is going to grow at a much faster and consistent pace
Mm-hmm.
than income ever will.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you can remember that and keep investing and staying investing, you can do very well.
Mm-hmm.
It just takes time.
Right. No, that's very true. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're really not building wealth really for this generation as much as you are for your retirement and for the next one.
Correct, because if you're working for an employer, and this is the beauty of the country, right? This is why we're entrepreneurs, and partly, I'll be honest, why I'm one, is that if you work for someone, you never have the option for exponential returns.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get your salary, you may get raises, you may get bonuses, and you may be paid very well.
Yeah.
But that owner is the one that's getting the exponential returns. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really where, if you want to build wealth quickly, you got to take on that risk. You got to start your own firm. You got to do what you want. You got to be passionate about it, because it'll come through.
Yeah.
And you'll be successful. It does work. So that's the way I kind of look at it. Either start the company and run it and continue in that mindset, you're building it for the next generation,
Mm-hmm.
or continue to save for retirement, help your kids out. And then of course, life insurance is also, a good
Yeah.
way of leveraging that too, is a
Right.
good way to build the wealth for the kids. But to truly build it within the family unit for generations,
Mm-hmm.
own a company, save for retirement, and then educate the younger generations as well. That's also a great point too, is to continue to educate that younger group. Once
Yeah.
they learn it, they understand what to do and they can continue to build that wealth.
Right, for sure. So I was on TikTok the other day, and there's like this entire thread of people who just kind of went on this whole rant about how financial literacy is a scam, right? And that it's a
Yeah.
scam because it doesn't benefit the people who don't have that discretionary income to do things like invest, or to do things like put away or put aside money for a Roth or a Roth 401k or whatever the case may be. That in some ways is a legitimate argument, but there's a lot of pieces missing. What would you say to that person who doesn't have that discretionary income, who's really strapped for cash, really can't even already make ends meet, but clearly needs a way out and wants to start building wealth because they're already behind the eight ball?
Absolutely. So I'll say this about that TikTok trend, because there's someone else I chatted about with recently about that too. So be careful. How are those people getting paid? What's their incentive?
Mm-hmm.
Look, let's call it what it is. TikTok's not owned by a U.S. company. It's owned by a Chinese company. They certainly have different um, goals than we do.
Mm-hmm.
So always be careful of those things.
Right.
Truly be careful. If you're in a situation where you can't, build wealth, you're trying to make ends meet every month, look at your spending, track it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're listening to this on a brand new iPhone, but you can't make things meet every month, well, I think your priorities may need to be adjusted,
Mm-hmm.
because iPhones are expensive.
Right.
They're expensive, and it's not easy. I'll be the first to say it's not easy. There is so many reasons why, someone wants you to buy the next best thing. We're fighting doctors. You go to the grocery store, there's guys in lab coats
Mm-hmm.
that are doing everything they can to get your eyes to look at that product, buy it. You're
Yeah.
trying to trick your brain. It's tough. It's not easy.
Right.
Um, you really got to look at where's your spending going. Okay, if I have, 100 extra dollars a month, well, I got to find the best way to use that $100. So it's tough. So step one, look at your spending. Where's it going? Are you leaking money anywhere? And
Mm-hmm.
track that cash too. See where that cash goes.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be the first to say, if I have cash in my pocket, it's gone the next day. I'm spending it on something.
Mm-hmm.
I am notorious for that. So that's why actually I don't carry cash anymore, because I will spend it on stuff. I'll
Right.
go walk to the convenience store and buy, beer and Red Bull. Yeah, for better or for worse. So that's why I track the spending. And then, I think the next best thing you should do is build emergency savings, because that's what can really trap you. You can get in credit card debt,
Right.
is having that emergency savings. So 3 to 6 months is kind of the ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
I look at it like this. Hey, if you have a very good steady job, 3 months is fine. If you own a home, maybe push it up a little bit more, because I've had my foundation fail, and that was a pretty penny to spend, but thankfully I had that emergency savings to lean back on. And I went way into it, but it didn't break me. I didn't have to go get on credit or anything like that. Just paid it off.
Right.
Um, those are really the two big things. So spending and then emergency savings, because that's going to protect you from that next trap, which I'm sure you talked about a lot, is that credit card debt and how to get out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So inflation, minimum
Yeah.
wage. I mean, how does that apply to like even those consumers who already who are making minimum wage?
That's a tough one.
Or even below that, really.
Even below that. Yeah, it's tough. I'll be honest, I don't think there's a really good answer other than increasing your income.
Yeah.
It's the only way to do it, because minimum wage is tough.
Mm-hmm.
It's taxed.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy, on top of the highest inflation that we've probably really ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And there's reasons for that as well. But if you're at the minimum wage or below and you're not making ends meet, you got to find ways to increase your income.
Yeah.
And it's tough. I'm of the opinion that you get online, go on Indeed.com and apply like it's another full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
We have very low unemployment. We have people that are just looking for hard workers. I mean, and that's the hardest part, is getting through that filter.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's not. Um, Going online, looking around, and being very aggressive. You gotta treat it like it's a full-time job to increase that
Yeah.
income. It's tough.
Yeah. No,
There's another way about it.
No, I think that's kind of where I stand too. I know it sounds, I guess I don't really know how it sounds, but I think the one of the primary tenets of financial literacy, maybe even the first one, is to learn how to earn more. We really don't know how to earn more,
Yeah.
or like how to market ourselves, or I mean, for people who even may not even have access to the internet or things like LinkedIn, or knowing what the resources are. So one of my goals, even with this podcast or like whatever content that I produce, is to learn how to earn more so you can eliminate some of the debt, start to have that discretionary income um, to charge more. I mean, to invest more, or to be able to kind of like leverage things like real estate or whatever in the future, because all of that relies mostly on how much you make. But like you said before, income, even with more income, it's never going to catch up with how interest or compounding would bring you greater returns. So that's for sure. Okay.
Absolutely. And it's, one of the best skills I ever learned was how to sell. And I'm not going to say I'm amazing at it, but you always got to be able to sell either an idea, a concept, yourself,
Yeah.
your anything, because if you can understand that, and if you can look at it, let's say, you're trying to start a business, or you're, just starting out, look at it like this: is someone trying to, and I've heard this from my dad, are they trying to buy something, or are they trying to sell you something?
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at it from that lens, okay, if I'm going to go look for a new employer, is this employer trying to sell me something? Like they say, no, it takes money to start money. It's probably a pyramid scheme.
Right.
Run away.
Right.
Run away. But they're saying,
Right.
hey, we need help. We're buried. We can't grow. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to pay you to help us grow.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a good opportunity.
Yeah.
And libraries are great. I've worked out of a library tons of times. I'm a huge fan of them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. And even when I didn't know, like I was in somebody's chest getting answers. Like, I don't care if they thought I was annoying. I don't care. I don't care if they judge me. I don't give a damn. I need the answers.
Yep.
Like, what do you know that I don't know? And how are you going to how are you going to give me the answers so that I can get there too? And then you never forget those people, like you make sure you show your gratitude, but definitely, like, especially in this country with the competition and where the risk of falling into a situation where you can't make those ends meet is always looming. I don't care how much wealth you have. Like there's crypto millionaires that were millionaires yesterday and today they're not, right? So that threat is always there. So definitely always just staying on top of your education, who you're talking to, that kind of stuff. No, for sure. I agree.
Yeah, and to add on to that, crypto. So I am not a fan of crypto at all.
Why not?
No, I'm not a fan, and I'll even tell you a funny story about it. So in college, I had a friend of mine who was always ahead of the game.
Okay.
Like, you know, about Minecraft before it was like what it is today.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Hey man, like you're in economics. Do you want some crypto?" I was like he's like, "Bitcoin." I'm like, "What is that?" He goes, "Oh, it's digital currency, and you can use it to go buy a vending machine." I'm like, "Okay, where are these vending machines?" Like, Japan. I'm like, what am I going to go to Japan for?
Right.
So I literally traded that as an orange. If you guys are going to find it, go for it. It's an orange SanDisk flash drive. I think it had 30 coins on it. And I traded it for like Little Caesars pizza and probably just food. I'm thinking about it like in college. And I said, here you go. And I look at it and I just kind of laugh, right? Because I would have sold it anyways. But the reason why I don't like crypto is because it's one, it's not regulated to the point where I know what's gonna happen. Mm-hmm. There's no real history of crypto outside of everyone's trying to sell me crypto. Like I just don't. I'm not a big fan of it. The people that are very big evangelists on it, mm-hmm. I think are coming from the right place and are thinking properly, but maybe 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
What
from
about NFTs?
same thing. I think they're super cool. Don't get me wrong. I think they're cool as can be. I would love to have an NFT. I think it's so cool. But I look at it from a view of art, not from a view of,
Yeah, sure.
a store currency, which can happen. But look at it like this. So there's people that, and they're at every major airport in the world, that will have exceptionally expensive artwork, 10, 20, 30, $40 million pieces of art. Well, the intrinsic value of that art is the dollar, but it's really the paint,
Yeah.
the beauty of it, right? That's what that is. It stays
Right.
at the airport because it doesn't get taxed, but that's the intrinsic value. If I have an NFT and I can just turn off a switch, well, where's the value in that? It's gone. It disappears. Like, what happens if we start building quantum computing that can start breaking blockchains, which we already have quantum computers at MIT? What happens if we can get into those? That money can be stolen very quickly. So that store of value is kind of not as valuable anymore. That's my personal opinion on it.
Right.
I tell folks, if you want to do it, I'm not a big fan of it. I think there's
Right.
really boring, smart mutual funds that work. That's kind of what I use.
Right.
Not just the crypto stuff, which is
Right.
cool. Don't get me wrong, they're cool, but it's not for me.
Okay. So I get that. But your argument is to just go with the hard old traditional dollar bill. But then what about the US, who's rumored to starting an equivalent to a crypto coin?
Yeah. So I look at it from this. So look what happened in Canada. With the truckers that came through. They actually, and this is kind of near and dear to my heart because I'm half Canadian. My grandma lives in Montreal. My mom was born in Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
And I was following it pretty closely. And one of the things that happened was the government came in and said, hey, if you're here, we're going to turn off your bank account and shut off your bank account.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, now what? Well, now we can't move money around.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens? Because how do you have real stores of value elsewhere? So the US crypto dollar, I think, is interesting.
Right.
End of the day, cash is always going to be king no matter what happens. Cash is king. And maybe have something diversified. I personally would probably not want to do it because what and this is maybe a little tinfoil hat, but what happens if the government comes in and just turns off that dollar? Right. Like I just don't know. Yeah, that's kind of my opinion on it. So I'm kind of like, yeah.
Okay. So you own no crypto.
I own no crypto. I don't have any. I have friends that have it. I invested in it a little bit a long time ago it was a ETF of crypto, is probably a good way to say it. Got burned and said, I'm done with it. Just boring, consistent dollar cost averaging in real companies today seem to make sense for me.
Okay. I think I have to disagree with you, James.
That's fair. That's totally fair. Tell me more.
I know, only because I think it's the future. I don't think it works 100. Like, you're right. It's not foolproof yet. 100% agree with you on that. There's still too many variables where it's just like, okay, this doesn't work it doesn't feel as secure as the US dollar does. I get that. But then when you try to kind of go point for point with the US dollar and the cryptocurrency, there are, just look, if you really consider just inflation right now, that is kind of like one of those points where it's just like, okay, well, we just keep printing money and then we're just going to keep getting higher and higher inflation rates. So kind of like point for point, there's always something that someone can disagree with the US dollar. And then there's always something someone can disagree with the US, with the cryptocurrencies. But at the same time, there's just so much newness that people are scared and they're averse to risk when it comes to cryptocurrency. But and then the reason why I disagree is because there's so many places and people that are adopting it. You can pay with crypto now on airlines. There's ATMs coming out. Whole countries are adopting this as their currency. Like, it's just, I see it being so deeply interwoven into the lives of hundreds of thousands of people that I don't see it going away anywhere soon. And the same risk that you see, I'm sure there are the same people in those white lab coats working to mitigate those risks, right? So I don't know. I don't think it's going away. It's not
Oh
going
yeah, I don't think it's going away. I'm not
Yeah.
like being like the Stasio guy, like, oh, the internet's a fad. Like, I'm not saying it's a fad or anything like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
I look at it as, what is it? Right now, it's a
Yeah.
speculative investment.
Yeah. For
It's
sure.
really what it is.
Yeah.
And the dollar is a store of value. And we
Mhm.
think about inflation, the dollar, the beauty of it is that the United States has a central bank. A
Mhm.
lot of other places really don't. Like Europe has a European central bank, but it's
Mhm.
not really ran by a handful of people making a decision. It's ran by countries and
Right.
that stuff. Well, they can literally say money supply, which we did with the 1.9 trillion that came
Mhm.
out, shot up way too much.
Mhm.
And at the time, it made sense. It's the right call. So I
Right.
won't really disagree with that. And they said, okay, well, we have too much money out there. So they will literally press a button on a computer and say, less money.
Right.
Crypto, we kind of can't do that. And I think what will happen with Bitcoin and potentially Ethereum, if I remember right,
Mhm.
they're limited in the number of coins they
Right.
can make.
Right.
So we kind of become on the Bitcoin standard or the effectively the Ethereum standard. So it
Mhm.
becomes the gold standard again. So
Right.
what happens when you run out of gold, which we did in the 70s, as the US did in the 70s. That's why we moved to a credit-based system
Mhm.
and made money much more efficient. So that's
Yeah.
kind of why, I really am curious to see what happens. Like I've got books on it. Like I'm so curious to see what happens. It's just
Mhm.
for me, I tell folks, if you want to be really risky, go for it. But I think there's better options out there to be very risky and aggressive. Like,
Right.
you know, real estate can always work. I think people
Mhm.
just something to do in retirement.
Right.
Um, real estate, you have other investments that are exceptionally aggressive. You have options that are leveraged. Those work as well. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's just, are you diversified? That's really the whole thing. Are you
Yeah.
diversified?
Right.
Because the energy stocks right now are making great money.
Mhm.
They weren't a few years ago, but everything
Right.
else is doing great. So as long as you're diversified, you're
Right.
gonna be okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. On that note, James. James. Yeah, no, I like to hear people's ideas about crypto only because the arguments they're so varied. Like some people are just like, I'm putting my life savings into crypto, and other people are just like, I never want to see it a day in my life. And there's never like someone really in the middle. It's just like all or nothing, and it's interesting to kind of see how it's going to play out. Because I'm like, I'm gonna use that clip in 10 years from now and see how it ages. Okay,
I
James.
hope there's egg on my face. I really
Okay.
do. Yeah,
Okay.
I hope I am so wrong on this, and I'm okay
Okay.
if I'm wrong. Yeah,
Okay.
I hope I'm wrong.
No, that works. All right. So James, if anyone needs some wealth management advice, insurance included. I know I said I hate it because we've talked about it so much, but insurance included, where would they get a hold of you?
So best way to get a hold of me is woodallwealthmanagement.com, Woodall, and it's all one word. That's usually the best way to get a hold of me. I think I'll start getting on social media a little bit more,
Okay.
but currently that's the best way to get a hold of me. Give me a call, send me a message. I'm always here and love helping people out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, James.
Oh, thank you, Natalie. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Can't wait to come back.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for listening to the Mental Money Podcast. Please go ahead and remember to subscribe, but don't hoard all of this good information for yourself. Share this information with someone that you know could use it, especially if they need a shift in their mindset or someone who would love to have more money. So until we meet again, remember, like Uncle Snoop said, keep your mind on your money and your money on your mind.